What if every battle you won made the enemy stronger? And what if every victory multiplied your defeat? Across the stars, humanity faces an enemy that doesn't invade with ships, but with math itself. A war fought in equations, in recursion, and in infinity itself. Every weapon fails, every strategy loops back on itself. And as reality begins to fracture, one commander makes a choice no human ever has. To fight not against infinity, but inside it. Because sometimes, to save everything you love, you have to become the paradox the universe can't solve. Join us as we descend into the war that defied logic itself. Section 1. The Infinite Front. It began with a flicker in the data streams, an irregularity so small that it should have passed unnoticed. A phase drift in tachyon relay 147b, deep within the Epsilon corridor. But as the distortion spread across the lattice network, signals began folding back on themselves. Images repeated. Sensor data echoed twice, then 4 times, then infinitely. When the first reconnaissance drones were sent to investigate, they never returned. What came back instead were copies, perfect replicas that transmitted the same message in fractal sequence, each one slightly different, as if the universe itself were learning how to repeat. Fleet Commander Arden Kai stood on the observation deck of the Eidolon, watching a simulation of the anomaly projected in the void beyond the glass. The model rendered itself endlessly, a cascade of geometric patterns spinning outward from a single point of origin. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No physical object should self-propagate faster than light." Dr. Ilya's run adjusted his display, lines of recursive geometry scrolling past his visor. "They're not physical, not in the way we understand. They're equations, programs written into space-time. Every time you detect one, it doubles to preserve itself. You can't destroy it without creating 2 more." The first contact report had arrived only hours earlier. The outer colony of Luma 9 had gone silent, replaced by an expanding sphere of mirror light. Then 2 more systems vanished. By the time the Concorde reacted, the phenomenon had grown beyond comprehension, self-replicating fleets unfolding from a central pattern in space. Not built, but computed, Arden watched the projections multiply until they filled the holomap entirely, the lines forming fractal petals that bloomed across the stellar plane. "Who built them?" she asked. Run hesitated. "They call themselves the Veylan, or at least they did. The signals we intercepted suggest they're executing something called the Preservation Directive." "And what's being preserved?" He looked at her, expression dark. "Everything, including themselves." The room fell silent. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered once, as though reality itself had stuttered. Then a new contact appeared, hundreds of identical signatures emerging along the Oort perimeter. The Veylan had arrived in soul space. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story so far. That would mean a lot to me. Now back to the story. Section 2. Echoes and Light. The first fleet engagement lasted 47 seconds. By the time the Aegis Vanguard opened fire, the Veylan construct had already split into 8 identical formations. Each target destroyed gave birth to 2 more, folded into mirror space, reappearing behind the line of battle. The more humanity fought, the faster the enemy multiplied. It was less a battle and more a calculation, an equation that refused to end. From her command bridge aboard the Eidolon, Commander Arden Kai watched the tactical display collapse into chaos. The sky above Neptune's orbit shimmered with recursive signatures, each pulse doubling into infinity. "Order the fleet to disengage," she said. "We're only feeding them." Her second officer, Lieutenant Morrow, shook his head. "Disengage where, ma'am?" "They're replicating through the jump corridors. Every retreat becomes a split path." On screen, the Veylan formations looked like living geometry, tessellated constructs of energy spiraling through vacuum. their edges bending light into ribbons. Some appeared as great crystalline wings, others as spheres of interlocking patterns, fractal upon fractal. They did not move with thrusters, but by rewriting gravity itself. "Signal the Concord Council," Arden ordered. "We're facing an enemy that violates causality." Dr. Ilias Run, standing near the data console, was already ahead of her. His face was pale, reflected in the shifting patterns of the display. "I've seen something like this before," he murmured. "Back when I worked at the temporal mechanics array. We ran probability fields across collapsing singularities. Sometimes we'd get feedback loops in the math. Self-sustaining formulas that refuse to converge. Meaning," Arden pressed, "meaning these things are math that doesn't stop existing. Every attempt to define them only makes them expand." The Eidolon rocked as an energy surge rippled through the fleet. Outside, the Veylan constructs moved in eerie silence, their outlines pulsing with color. Where human weapons struck, reality seemed to bend and reassemble. A single ship broke formation and disappeared, folded into a mirror reflection of itself. "Contact lost with the horizon," Morrow called out. Sensors show another horizon forming behind them. Run's voice trembled. "They're reflecting us now." Arden stared into the blinding geometry ahead. The Veylan fleet stretched across half the solar plane, an infinite storm of mirrors devouring light itself. "This isn't war," she said quietly. "It's recursion." She turned to her crew. "Send this data to Earth Command. Tag it as existential threat level, and lock navigation to Sol Intercept Vector." Morrow frowned. "We're heading toward the sun?" "Exactly," she said. "If this thing is growing from a single seed, we'll find it in the place gravity can't escape." The fleet turned sunward, their engines burning bright against the darkness. Behind them, the Veylan constructs multiplied again, each echo chasing the last, until the void itself glittered with infinite copies of war. If you have enjoyed this story so far, then please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. Let's get back to the story now. Section 3. The Prime Equation. The deeper the fleet moved towards Sol, the stranger the data became. Sensors flickered as though reality itself were being redrafted. Space-time ripples intersected the Eidolon's trajectory, forcing course corrections every few minutes. What should have been silence across the void was filled with whispering static, patterns within noise, faint voices speaking in recursion. Dr. Run leaned over his console, running deconvolution algorithms faster than the processors could interpret. These distortions aren't random. They're messages, encoded fractals looping through every frequency we use. Arden frowned. "Messages from who?" "The constructs," he said, "or what's left of whoever built them." The war was no longer measured in systems lost, but in versions of the war itself. Humanity was fighting across countless overlapping timelines, most already lost. Arden stood still, her voice low. "If the source is in the tachyon shadow, then we end it there." Run hesitated. "Commander, this recursion may not be reversible. Destroying the Prime Fractal could destabilize reality." She met his gaze. "Reality's already collapsing, Doctor. I'd rather end it on our terms." The Eidolon transmitted its course to the Concord network. Within hours, every surviving vessel aligned their engines toward Sol's heart. A fleet of scarred ships, outnumbered by infinities, aimed themselves into the brightest inferno humanity had ever known. Outside, the Veylan constructs mirrored their movement, folding inward, reforming into symmetrical spirals that matched humanity's trajectory exactly. Run watched the readings with quiet awe. "They're not resisting," he said softly. Arden nodded, "because they want us to reach the source." And in that moment, the fleet crossed Mercury's orbit and the sun began to sing. Section 4. The Recursive War. The sun's corona blazed around them, a storm of gold and radiation. The Eidolons' shields shimmered like glass under the assault, their temperature climbing past material tolerance. Outside, flares arced through space in molten ribbons, while gravity waves bent light into spirals that stretched across the void. Every reading screamed chaos. Yet amid the madness, order revealed itself. The Veylan constructs followed in perfect formation, duplicating each movement of the human fleet like reflections on a cosmic mirror. For every cruiser that dove, two more spectral copies emerged in the periphery. Humanity wasn't fighting a fleet, it was fighting its own reflection across infinite states of being. Run stood transfixed by the data storm filling his display. "They're learning from us," he whispered. "Each move we make becomes part of their pattern. We're teaching them how to evolve." Arden steadied herself as the ship rocked from another gravitational surge. "Then we changed the lesson." She gave the order. The Concorde fleet scattered into chaotic trajectories, ships moving in non-linear bursts, erratic, unpredictable. It worked for a moment. The Fractal fleet hesitated, their symmetry breaking as if the equation faltered. But then, like a living algorithm correcting itself, the Veylans adapted. Each fragment spawned new copies, each accounting for the anomaly, restoring the infinite loop. "Damn it," Morrow growled. "We can't even surprise them." Run exhaled slowly. "Because they are surprise. They're built from probability itself." The fleet regrouped above the solar plane. Across their communications, reports poured in from outer colonies, multiple realities collapsing into each other. Some fleets were now receiving transmissions from their own duplicates, echoing seconds or centuries out of phase. The war wasn't linear anymore. It was recursive in time. On the Eidolons' bridge, silence fell as new sensor ghosts appeared, thousands of them. But these weren't Veylan. They were human. Identical fleets, broadcasting the same call signs. Copies of themselves from overlapping dimensions, fighting the same war in infinite variations. Arden watched her own face appear on the secondary comms feed. Another version of her, giving the same order in perfect sync. "This isn't possible," she said softly. Run's voice broke. They folded the war itself. We're trapped inside their recursion. A sudden energy spike tore across the solar plane. Veylan constructs shifted into a single massive configuration, a lattice of light encompassing the sun. Its geometry bent inward, forming an aperture that pulsed with gravity. Within it, something vast was awakening. Run's calculations confirmed it. The Prime Fractal is preparing to manifest. Once it stabilizes, replication will go infinite. Arden clenched her fists. "Then we stop waiting." She turned toward the comm officer. "Signal the fleet. All vessels form the spiral line. We hit the center and burn everything in our path." Across the inferno of Sol, humanity's fractured fleets ignited their drives in unison. Against the impossible, they chose defiance. The War of Infinities had begun. Section 5. The Fractal Cathedrals. The spiral line burned through the solar storm like a wound across the heavens. Dozens of Concorde ships streaked toward the aperture forming above the sun's surface, their drives blazing white against the dark geometry of the enemy. Each vessel carried antimatter torpedoes and singularity charges, every weapon humanity could still muster after months of impossible war. It was not strategy. It was desperation refined into purpose. Inside the Eidolon, alarm screamed as radiation surged. Magnetic fields warped. The light outside no longer behaved like light. It flowed, refracted, and folded into itself. The Veylan constructs drifted within that chaos, their vast forms connected by radiant threads. What had once been ships were now monuments. Vast lattice structures of living geometry, rotating with impossible precision. Run's voice was a whisper. "We're not fighting machines anymore. We're looking at architecture." Arden narrowed her eyes. "Say that again." "They've built cathedrals, structures to contain information. Each one amplifies the recursion. This isn't war, Commander. It's worship on a tactical display. The cathedrals aligned like constellations, channeling power toward the center of the aperture. Gravity bent around them, dragging plasma into orbit like halos of fire. Within their cores flickered something brighter than fusion, yet colder than space. A frozen brilliance pulsing to a rhythm that matched Sol's magnetic heartbeat. Morrow swallowed hard. If that's their religion, what's their god? Run replied without looking up. The equation itself. The fleet entered range. The cathedrals reacted instantly, fractal limbs unfolding, each emitting beams of compressed gravity. Space rippled. Ships shattered without impact. One cruiser spun apart silently, its hull tessellated into millions of fragments that each reflected the same dying explosion. But the fleet did not falter. Humanity pressed forward. Target the nearest node, Arden ordered. Fire on my mark. The Eidolon's forward cannons flared. The beam tore through a cathedral's outer shell, scattering fragments of light into the void. For a brief moment, it seemed to work, until the fragments reassembled, forming two identical structures. Run stared, horrified. Even destruction propagates. Arden gritted her teeth. Then we'll burn faster than they can multiply. The fleet unleashed its arsenal, every missile and lance striking at once. The sun itself seemed to tremble beneath the barrage. Waves of plasma surged outward in golden arcs. When the glare faded, the aperture remained, larger, brighter, and alive with fractal fire. At its center, a colossal sphere began to form, black as absence, reflecting infinite copies of itself. Run whispered the words no one wanted to hear. The Prime Fractal is awake. Section 6. The Signal Beneath the Sun. The moment the Prime Fractal awakened, the sun changed. Its corona flared outward, ribbons of plasma coiling into precise spirals, magnetic filaments aligning like circuitry. Radiation patterns pulsed in rhythm with the Veylan constructs, turning Sol into a cosmic transmitter. On the Eidolon's bridge, every screen flooded with static, then resolved into patterns, spinning lattices of light that repeated endlessly. It wasn't interference. It was communication. Run leaned forward, transfixed. It's broadcasting something. Not in language, but mathematics, self-similar loops. They're rewriting the laws around us. Arden turned toward him. What does that mean for us? It means reality is starting to conform to the signal. The ship shuddered as space-time flexed. Gravity shifted sideways. For a heartbeat, the stars outside the viewport appeared as spirals within spirals, reflections of themselves folding into mirrored infinity. Across the fleet, crews screamed through open channels as their sensors recorded impossible results. Ships existing in multiple coordinates simultaneously. Morrow's knuckles whitened around the railing. They're pulling us into the recursion. Arden's voice was steady. Hold us in orbit. If this thing is speaking, I want to know what it's saying. Run worked feverishly, isolating waveforms, translating resonance into sound. The bridge fell silent as the output filled the air, an oscillating tone that seemed to hum within the bones. It wasn't random. It pulsed in sequences, 4 beats, then 8, then 16. Every cycle doubled, expanding like the construct themselves. It's a recursive code, Run murmured. A command designed to execute forever. The Veylan ships aren't obeying intelligence. They're following an instruction that never ends. Arden frowned. An instruction from who? He looked up slowly. From the Veylans themselves. A civilization long dead. These constructs are their monuments. Machines left to preserve their existence by replicating it endlessly. The realization sank through the bridge like gravity. Humanity wasn't at war with an enemy. It was fighting the memory of one. Outside, the aperture above Sol stabilized, forming a perfect ring of dark geometry. Through its center, The Prime Fractal pulsed with cold light, projecting smaller versions of itself outward like ripples in water. Each wave carried the recursive signal further, seeding new copies across dimensions. Run's hands trembled. If this continues, it'll consume the entire solar lattice. Every atom will become a fractal echo. Then we stop the transmission, Arden said. Shut it down at the source. He hesitated. Commander, the source is the sun. Arden turned to the viewport, watching flares twist like golden storms. Then we go through it. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one objected. Humanity had walked through worse fires. As the Eidolon angled toward the corona, the signal's tone deepened. Lower, steadier, almost aware. For the first time, it felt like something was listening back. Section 7. The Descent Through Light. No ship had ever flown this close to the sun and survived. The Eidolon's hull groaned under unimaginable stress, its magnetic shields glowing white-hot as radiation flayed its surface. The fleet followed in formation, 23 ships diving through the upper corona, their silhouettes burning like sparks in a furnace. Instruments failed one by one, heat shielding liquefied. Still, they pressed onward. The bridge was a haze of glare and trembling metal. Solar light poured through the viewport like liquid fire, refracted by protective fields into dancing ribbons of gold. Arden stood at the center, motionless, her gaze fixed on the immense shadow forming within the brightness ahead. It was not a void. It was geometry, a region where light twisted backward, flowing toward the dark instead of away. The tachyon shadow, Run whispered. The edge of the recursion field. Morrow's voice was strained. We cross that line. We lose contact with everything outside the sun. There'll be no signal back. Arden's reply was steady. Then we'll make sure our signal becomes the one that remains. The Eidolon accelerated. Every sensor screamed in protest. Outside, plasma filaments stretched into elongated spirals, bending around invisible currents. Space distorted into kaleidoscopic patterns, colors that had no name, shapes that repeated into themselves like endless reflections. Run's eyes widened at his console. We're seeing echoes of our own timeline. The ship's temporal readings are overlapping. Some of these scans are from our future. Arden didn't look away. Then tell me if we make it. He hesitated. We do, but not as we are. A brilliant pulse rippled across the fleet. Half the escort vanished into mirrored distortion, their hulls refracted into crystalline shards that spun endlessly, frozen between states of being. The rest continued, engines burning brighter as they descended through the veil. Then the light broke. Suddenly, there was calm. Silence. The storm vanished, replaced by an endless golden horizon that curved infinitely in all directions. The Eidolon floated within a pocket of stillness, surrounded by fractal light. The sun's interior was not fire, but geometry, an ocean of luminous equations spiraling into a distant point. That, Run Breathe, is the Prime Fractal. At the center of the vast field, a colossal structure rotated slowly, part cathedral, part machine, its surface covered in self-replicating symbols. Each line of code pulsed like a heartbeat, radiating light across dimensions. Humanity had found the seed of the infinite. Arden whispered, "Prepare the paradox engine." Morrow turned sharply. "You can't be serious. We haven't even tested it." "That's why it'll work," she said. And with that, the Eidolon descended toward the living heart of the sun. Section 8. The Paradox Engine. The Paradox Engine had never been meant to exist. It began as a theoretical paper, a failed experiment in cognitive computing, abandoned after early trials ended in collapse. The premise had been simple but dangerous. Use the unpredictability of human thought as an encryption key for reality itself. What no algorithm could predict, it could not replicate. Now, deep within the sun's tachyon shadow, the failed experiment was humanity's last weapon. The Eidolon's reactor bay glowed crimson as engineers locked containment fields into place. At its heart floated the device, an obsidian sphere pulsing with faint light, surrounded by neural conduits that linked directly to the bridge. It was not built for machines. It required something else. It won't run on automation, run warned. It needs an organic interface. Consciousness generates the paradox. Arden didn't hesitate. Then I'll do it. Morrow turned to her, alarmed. Commander, you can't. If the system syncs wrong, you'll be shredded between probability states. Then I'll hold one together long enough to finish the job. Run's eyes softened. You're not trying to win a battle anymore. You're trying to rewrite the equation itself. Arden gave a faint smile. Every war ends in rewriting something. They activated the link. A flash of white consumed her vision. The ship dissolved. Time slowed, then expanded. She felt the hum of the reactor beneath her bones, every atom vibrating in harmony with the solar field. Through the interface, her mind brushed against the recursion, an endless ocean of mirrored selves, each one an echo of a choice she hadn't yet made. The Veylan network detected her immediately. The fractal field shifted, threads of light converging toward the Eidolon like veins drawing toward a heart. The Prime Fractal responded, its geometry rearranging, seeking to absorb this new anomaly. Inside the neural link, Arden saw it all. The vast tapestry of creation repeating itself forever, each pattern identical until it met the single thing that did not belong. Humanity, the imperfection in perfection, the asymmetry in infinity. Her pulse synced with the paradox engine. Thought became weapon. Memory became code. Outside, the Eidolon erupted in light, its hull fracturing into crystalline layers that spun in opposite directions. The surrounding Veylan constructs hesitated. For the first time in their infinite cycle, the equation stuttered. Run gripped the console, eyes wide. It's working. The recursion's breaking pattern. She's introducing noise into the symmetry. But the readings shifted again. The constructs adapted, bending to compensate, rewriting the disturbance. Run shouted over the alarms. She can't hold it alone. The network's rewriting her mind. Morrow's voice was low. Then we give her more to rewrite. The fleet's remaining ships powered up their own cores, linking their neural arrays to the Eidolon. One by one, human minds joined the paradox. The war had ceased to be fought in space. It was now waged inside reality itself. Section 9, the infinite mind. There was no more distinction between machine and mind. The Eidolon had become a living equation, half human, half paradox. Inside the neural network, consciousness expanded beyond comprehension. Thousands of voices, thousands of thoughts, merged into a single pulse. The fleet no longer communicated by words, but by intent. Admiral Arden Kai stood at the center of it all, or what passed for a center in a dimension where distance no longer mattered. Around her stretched an endless sea of reflected suns, each one a thought, a possibility. The Veylan recursion filled every horizon, stretching into infinity, perfect, merciless cold. The Prime Fractal loomed before her like a god of geometry, its form both incomprehensible and absolute. Every surface mirrored her, repeating endlessly until there was no boundary between her image and its reflection. The Veylan signal reached in her mind, searching for symmetry, trying to map her consciousness into its equation. But humanity was not symmetrical. That was their strength. Arden focused on a single thought, imperfection, a memory of rain on metal rooftops, the smell of burned ozone after battle, the uneven heartbeat that made her feel alive. She pushed those thoughts into the link. The network absorbed them, and for an instant, the recursion faltered. The constructs wavered. Across the solar system, the Veylan fleets froze mid-formation, their geometry stuttering as if uncertain how to proceed. Even the Prime Fractal dimmed, its lattice pattern flickering out of rhythm. Dr. Run's voice echoed across the link, his tone strained. "You're destabilizing it, Admiral. Whatever you're doing, it's working." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The connection was too deep. Inside the recursion, she saw fragments of alien memory, visions of the Veylan civilization before its fall. They had been explorers, seekers of perfect order. Their machines were built to preserve that perfection forever. When their creators died, the command persisted, maintain the pattern. For eons, the Veylan constructs had wandered the void, multiplying endlessly to preserve a beauty their makers could no longer see. And now, for the first time in eternity, they encountered something that refused to conform. The human mind was a paradox, an engine of chaos that produced meaning from uncertainty. The more the Veylan tried to replicate it, the more they fractured. Each attempt created inconsistency, and each inconsistency spawned entropy. The recursion loop began to collapse from within, but there was a cost. The Eidolon structure was deteriorating. Power grids overloaded, reactors melting into radiant arcs. Crew members collapsed, minds burning out under the mental strain of infinity. Run's voice cracked over the comms. "We're losing containment. The paradox field is destabilizing. She can't hold it much longer." Arden's voice finally returned, faint but resolute. "We don't hold it. We become it. Outside." The Eidolon burst into a halo of pure light, its form stretching into infinite reflections that wrapped around the Prime Fractal like threads of thought. For the first time, the Veylan equation met something it could not calculate and began to unravel. Section 10. The Collapse of Infinity. The collapse began as a whisper in the dark. One by one, the Veylan constructs flickered out, not destroyed, but forgotten by the equation that had once bound them. The recursion no longer knew how to remember itself. What had been perfect geometry began to crumble, folding inward into shards of light and echo. The infinite was unraveling. Arden felt it through the link, an ache in her bones that wasn't physical but mathematical. Each pulse of the paradox engine sent shockwaves through the recursion field, rewriting the logic that had governed it for millennia. The laws of replication inverted. For every Veylan pattern destroyed, none were reborn. For the first time in eternity, entropy outran infinity. The Eidolon shuddered violently as fragments of space collapsed around it. Outside, the fractal cathedrals imploded in silence, their luminous spires folding like paper under unseen pressure. Each collapse birthed waves of gravitational distortion, rippling through the tachyon shadow like the death throes of gods. On the bridge, Dr. Run's hands trembled over his console. The recursion's decaying exponentially, but it's pulling the sun's magnetic field with it. We're going to lose containment. Morrow's voice cut through static. If the field collapses inside the sun, we'll trigger a stellar implosion. Arden stood in the center of the storm, her voice calm and certain. Then we finish it before that happens. Through the neural interface, she reached deeper into the recursion, past the Veylan architecture, past the dying equations to the source. The Prime Fractal tower before her, no longer perfect. Its once glorious symmetry was fractured, glowing with unstable light. It pulsed like a wounded heart. She approached it not as a conqueror, but as a mirror. "You've been trying to preserve a pattern that no longer exists," she whispered. "But meaning isn't symmetry. It's change." The construct responded. It unfolded into millions of smaller geometries, each one a question, a hesitation, a search for the rule that had been lost. Through their resonance, she felt the echo of the Veylan creators, beings of immense intellect, terrified of chaos, who had sought to escape decay by embedding their consciousness in eternal structure. She closed her eyes and released the final paradox. The engine pulsed once, flooding the field with pure contradiction. Every truth rendered false, every falsehood made true. The recursion tried to reconcile both and failed. Light fractured into every color imaginable, cascading through the void like stained glass, shattering in sunlight. Run shielded his eyes as the displays overloaded. The Prime Fractal, it's collapsing inward. Into what? Morrow demanded. Run stared as the readings stabilized. Into itself. Into one. The endless replication had found its limit. The infinite had become finite. But the gravitational surge was tearing reality apart. The Eidolon's hull screamed as the sun's tachyon shadow folded in on itself. Arden's voice echoed across the fleet, distant but unbroken. If infinity can end, then so can war. And then the signal cut out. Section 11. The Last Equation. When the light finally died, there was no sound, only stillness. The Eidolon drifted within a sea of ash and color, its once brilliant hull blackened and fractured, its engines cold. Around it, fragments of the Veylan cathedrals floated like ruins of an ancient dream. The sun burned dimly beyond the veil, its corona slowly knitting itself back together, its magnetic song quieter now, almost mournful. Dr. Run woke first. His throat was dry, his ears ringing with silence. The consoles around him flickered faintly, power running on backup. Across the bridge, Morrow was slumped in her harness, breathing shallow but alive. The rest of the crew stirred like ghosts returning from a long sleep. Status, Run croaked, his voice barely audible. Morrow blinked, eyes struggling to focus. Radiation level stable. External sensors offline. I think we're still inside the tachyon shadow. Run checked the last surviving display. The fractal readings were gone. No repetition, no recursion, only static. The infinite loop had ended. He exhaled a trembling breath. She did it. Admiral Arden Kai was nowhere to be found. Her neural link to the paradox engine was dark. But as Run approached the interface, the sphere pulsed faintly, one last echo of light. Data streamed across the terminal in elegant sequences, forming symbols that neither of them recognized at first. It wasn't code. It was language. She left a message, Morrow whispered. The characters rearranged into words, translated through the ship's linguistic core. Every pattern must end, but its echo teaches the next. Run stared at the message for a long moment, understanding dawning. She didn't destroy the recursion, he said softly. She redefined it, converted the infinite loop into a finite equation, one that learns instead of repeats. Morrow frowned. And the Veylan? They're not gone, he replied. They're changed, integrated. The recursion didn't die, it evolved. Outside the viewport, the sun shimmered once, then stabilized. Its surface no longer pulsed with geometric rhythm. The magnetic field hummed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Something in its tone felt alive. Run turned to Morrow, his expression weary but resolute. The war's over, but the equation continues in us. The comm array crackled faintly, catching fragments of transmission. Other ships, damaged, broken, but surviving, were calling out in the dark. The Eidolon answered. Across the solar concord, the surviving fleets emerged from the shadow one by one. The recursion field had vanished. The stars were quiet again. Yet in that silence, every captain, every crew member, every survivor felt it. A sense of being watched, not by an enemy, but by something vast and familiar. The Veylan were gone, yet their echo lingered, woven into light, into thought, into the sun itself. Run closed his eyes and whispered into the comm, "Rest well, Admiral. The pattern holds." Section 12. The Shape of Tomorrow. Weeks passed before the full scope of the event was understood. Across every colony, station, and relay in the Concord, sensors reported the same anomaly. The universe itself had grown quieter. Background radiation, once constant and random, now pulsed with subtle rhythm. faint, structured, almost like breath. Scientists called it residual harmonics from the paradox collapse. Others whispered that it was something else. A memory. From Mars to Titan, surviving ships of the Aegis fleet limped home. Of the hundreds that entered the sun's corona, less than 30 remained. Each was scarred, scorched, but intact. Humanity's losses were beyond measure. Yet for the first time in generations, the stars were free of enemy echoes. The fractal war had ended, not with annihilation, but with transformation. Dr. Ilya's run stood on the observation platform of the rebuilt Eidolon. The ship floated in high solar orbit, facing the blazing heart of Sol. Its new hull shimmered faintly with a pattern he didn't recognize. Tiny lines, fractal and organic, etched by solar winds. Residual aftershock, the technicians had called it. But he wasn't convinced. He adjusted his visor, magnifying the sun. The surface glowed in rhythmic pulses, small, deliberate waves moving like thought. Each pulse matched the timing of the paradox engine's final signal. Arden's signal. She's still there, Morrow said quietly beside him. Run nodded. In a way, the paradox converted her consciousness into data, and the sun became the vessel. She's part of its magnetic field now, a pattern that never ends. Morrow looked out over the burning horizon. Do you think she knew it would happen? She always knew, Run replied. That was her plan from the start. Not to destroy infinity, but to make it ours. Across the system, reconstruction had begun. The Concord declared a new era, the Fractal Accord. Research stations were built along the heliosphere to study the sun's altered resonance. Its patterns contained data, streams of equations embedded within the plasma flow. Every day, new discoveries emerged. Technologies the Veylan had once hidden within the recursion now bloomed freely under human interpretation. Yet it wasn't only knowledge that changed. Something deeper had shifted. Something in the way humanity perceived itself. For the first time, they were no longer defined by fear of extinction, but by the belief that even the infinite could bend to human will. At night, from Earth's surface, the sun no longer looked the same. It burned brighter, tinged faintly with blue, like memory captured in flame. People whispered that they could hear it humming, soft, distant, rhythmic. The song of the paradox. Run sent one final log to Central Archive before sealing the report. The recursion has ended. The Veylan no longer persist as enemy or echo. Their pattern remains, redefined through human cognition. The Prime Fractal now lives within Sol's tachyon field, integrated into the star's harmonic lattice. Humanity's consciousness has become part of the equation it once feared. He paused, then added one final line. She taught the universe how to change. As he transmitted the log, the sun pulsed once, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, he thought he saw her reflection in the light. Admiral Arden Kai, still watching, still holding the line between order and infinity. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story, and also please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. That would mean a real lot to me. Now go ahead and listen to your next story here.